cat to play Oprah, so let's see, questions. A lot of, there have been a number of questions and such emailed from international groups and kind of questions ahead of time, a number of which have been kind of answered through the course of the talk, so I'm primarily going to focus on audience questions here, but I did want to acknowledge for the people who were watching via live stream that we did get their questions and we do appreciate their sending their thoughts in. So, okay.
This is a question for either of you, whoever feels comfortable answering. So many of we parents have difficulty finding practitioners to help us. And a question that would, an answer to this question would help me to understand the process. If I wanted to become a provider, if I wanted to become a therapist to help people with eating disorders, how would I get trained? What would I become? Where would I go? And that will help me to understand who to look for out there in the world to help me.
In the front row, come to Chapel Hill. You can see it. I didn't say it myself. No, but I think it is really important because there are different paths that people can take to get training in the area, and that depends on whether you're going to go a social work path, whether you're going to go a PhD psychologist path, whether you're going to go an MD path and become a physician, and then either a pediatrician or a psychiatrist or an adolescent medicine specialist. You know, there are different pathways in. The important node in there to find is that somewhere, at some point along their training, did an intensive fellowship, internship, postdoc, whatever, at one of the key centers that really teaches evidence-based treatment. You know, if they're just coming through generic programs and have never really done any supervised treatment or structured training about eating disorders, they could be making it up.
Yeah, you know, there's certain kind of failings in the field that I think is important to start to kind of understand and address. So you get a certain training, whether you're, you know, in medical school, in residency, or psychology, or whatever, but people go out and then they go into practice, and then the question is, as new treatments come along, how do they really learn it? So, you know, Jim has set up a center, you know, you might want to talk a little about that, where he provides training and certification for people in family-based kind of treatment. And I think that's great. And in fact, it's really the kind of thing that we need to do, because you need to raise the question of how do people in an increasingly complicated world with new things and evolving kind of technology, how do you get people that are out there now, you know, to learn new things and to get up to speed? And yeah, you can go to meetings and do this, but or you can do it on the weekend, but it probably isn't intensive enough. You really need to almost retrain people in a way, and I think that's, you know, an issue we need to address in the field. You want to say anything about your program, Jim?
Carrie, I'm going to add one thing. Okay. I just forgot a very important group of people, and that's the dietitians. That's the other group of people where specialist training is really important. In fact, we're working with a lot of RDs to develop specific counseling tracks in their training so that they do get some specialized training in eating disorders during their dietitian training, which isn't always there on the program.
Okay, any other, let's see, get this side. Okay.
Okay, hi. I guess either of you can answer this. I was just surprised by the statistic, I'm wondering if anyone else was, that said that 50 to 70% would get better with no treatment, because I wasn't taught that, and I was actually kind of taught that when I was trained on Maudsley method, it could have been changed by now, but that after 3 years with the illness, the statistics are somewhat grim. So I was just curious about that quote, I guess.
Yeah, you know, I don't think I don't want to, you know, misinterpret that. It's not unusual that people are ill for 3, 5, 10 years, but, you know, there is a group of people, and it's probably a majority, that gets better in their, you know, mid-20s. How much, you know, I think what we don't know is how much treatment contributes to that. Is it contribute enormously to that? Is there a group of people that respond, that would get better spontaneously? Or what's the interaction there? But clearly the outcome studies do show, over time that, there is, a substantial number of people do get better. We just don't know the course of it or the interactions with treatment.
I think this speaks to a really important point that we need to talk to the government about, and that is that we have terrible longitudinal epidemiologic data in this country. It's almost impossible to answer these questions well, because when it comes to things like the behavioral risks surveillance study, eating disorders gets chopped off on the editor's floor. So we don't have the data. Finland has some really good data, and they have shown, as Walt said, that there's a subgroup of people who really do have sort of like a drive-in, drive-out form of anorexia. It lasts about a year, they meet all the criteria, they get better with or without treatment. But that's not necessarily the same type of person that we're seeing in our treatment programs. But we just don't have any data where we track large cohorts of people over time to see what actually happens. And that's the kind of work we need to really understand the natural course of the illnesses. All of them. Anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, and everything in between.
And what can these do? What can the parent community do to help with that?
And the question is, what can the parent community do to help that? And I think Janine Cogan's in the audience jumping up and down saying, you can support the F.E.A.S.T Act. Because one of the things that the Eating Disorders Coalition and F.E.A.S.T has really done is that one of the things that we need is we have to be on the epidemiologist radar screen. And that's one of the things that F.E.A.S.T talks about in terms of centers of excellence and working with the CDC and the other agencies that really collect those sorts of data.
All right. Okay, other questions? Oh boy. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just having difficulty with this evidence-based kind of approach. Dr. Locke talked about Dr. Gully, or God, G-U-L-L, and then Dr. Guler talked about the phrenology. And he's the one who actually had the theory of the phrenology. So he was hit twice, the poor guy. And actually he was considered in the history of psychiatry as really the most empirical one, because he was based in evidence-based approach. So people who had big eyes, they were more intelligent. And he did his math. But then Dr. K talked about really a very messy kind of evidence about the bias, about everything. So how just, and I'm a professional and I have extreme difficult to find a evidence-based kind of approach. So how just can we have some kind of organization in the country that will be more non-biased, can guide those families to more evidence-based approach? Because this is the most practical thing I saw. Thank you.
I think that's a really interesting question, and if you look at the history of eating disorders, in our group we just did a pro seminar on the people in the past who had really formed this field. And I had my trainees go back and read a lot of the very early writings, and some of the very early writings of people like, we did Gull, of course, and then we read a lot of Hilda Brooks' work. And what's really interesting is that excellent therapists, just in their room, looking at their case series, have basically said everything that we're saying now. But they're saying it, they said it just based on what they saw in the room. What we're doing now is we're applying contemporary scientific principles to actually validate some of those observations. The challenge is, and I think what the real issue is with anorexia, especially with clinical trials, is being able to find large enough sample sizes to really make a dent in the literature, in the evidence base. It is very hard to do. I'll just give you a very practical today example. So we've developed this couple-based treatment for adults with anorexia nervosa where we get the partners involved with treatment. It's sort of like FBT for grown-ups, only the partner gets involved. And we knew we had to have 3 sites in order to get a large enough sample to actually show anything using the scientific principles that Walt was talking about. But yet the NIH said, costs too much money, 3 sites is too much. So we were good, obedient people, we cut it down to 1 site, and now they say you don't have enough people. What do you do? You know, and it's like, it's sort of like no exit. It's a little existential thing going on there. But these are precisely the issues that make it so hard, A, to develop the evidence base, and B, to evaluate the evidence base. And, you know, at some point you come down to it is what it is. You know, we're getting good data on family-based treatment. We're starting to get good data on some other interventions, but you go with what, at this point in time, seems to be the most solid from a scientific perspective.
Okay, I think we're unfortunately out of time for any more questions. We're going to break for lunch. We'll return promptly at 1:15. We'll restart. While we're doing lunch, the learning room and everything will also be open, so please go visit and take a look at all the good information in there. And we will reconvene promptly at 1:15.